It was a chilly Friday night in October, and the four friends, John, Mike, Sarah, and Lisa, had decided to meet up at their favorite bar for a night of drinking and catching up. The bar was a small, dimly lit place with a cozy atmosphere, and it was packed with people. John was the first to arrive, and he grabbed a table in the corner of the bar. Mike came in shortly after, and the two of them ordered a pitcher of beer to start. They chatted about work and their respective love lives, catching up on all the news since they had last seen each other. Soon, Sarah and Lisa arrived, and the group ordered more drinks and settled in for a long night of hanging out. The conversation turned to more light-hearted topics, like music, movies, and the latest viral memes. As the night wore on and the beer kept flowing, the group began to feel restless. John suggested that they do something more exciting than just sitting around in the bar all night. Mike agreed, and soon they were all brainstorming ideas for what to do. "We could go to that haunted house on the hill," Sarah suggested. Lisa and John both looked skeptical. "Are you serious?" John asked. "It's supposed to be really creepy," Sarah continued. "I've always wanted to check it out." Mike nodded in agreement. "It could be fun," he said. After some further discussion, they all agreed to drive up to the abandoned haunted house on the hill and see what they could find. They finished their drinks, paid their tab, and headed out into the chilly night air, excited for the adventure that awaited them. The four friends piled into John's old station wagon, which had seen better days, and set off towards the haunted house on the hill. The drive was slow going, as the winding road leading up to the house was narrow and poorly maintained. The branches of the trees lining the road seemed to reach out like ghostly fingers, and the wind howled mournfully in the darkness. As they drove, the friends talked nervously about what they might find in the haunted house. They had all heard the stories of strange happenings and ghostly apparitions, and they couldn't help feeling a little spooked. The journey was not without its obstacles. At one point, they hit a pothole so deep that John thought they had blown a tire. And when they finally reached the top of the hill, they found that the road was blocked by a fallen tree. They had to get out and move it out of the way before they could continue. Finally, after what seemed like hours of driving, they caught a glimpse of the haunted house in the distance. It loomed ominously against the dark sky, its windows boarded up and its roof sagging. As they got closer, they could see that the front gate was chained shut, but they managed to find a gap in the fence and slip through. The path leading up to the house was overgrown with weeds and brambles, and the friends had to tread carefully to avoid tripping or getting tangled up. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and rotting wood, and the only sounds were their footsteps crunching on twigs and leaves. As they got closer to the house, the atmosphere grew increasingly eerie. The windows were dark and foreboding, and the shutters creaked ominously in the wind. The only light came from a dimly glowing moon, which cast strange shadows across the ground. The friends approached the front door, which was slightly ajar. They hesitated, exchanging nervous glances, before finally pushing it open and stepping inside. The interior of the house was even more decrepit than the outside. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and the floorboards creaked loudly underfoot. The air was thick with dust and cobwebs, and the only furniture they could see was a few broken chairs and a rickety old table. As the friends continued to explore the haunted house, they couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that seemed to permeate every room. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the curtains, set their nerves on edge. They moved cautiously from room to room, peering into dark corners and listening for any sign of movement. In one room, they found a dusty old wardrobe that creaked eerily when they opened it. In another, they stumbled upon a mirror that seemed to reflect strange, distorted images. As they continued to explore, the strange and unsettling things only became more frequent. They heard voices whispering in the darkness, saw apparitions flitting across the shadows, and felt cold hands brushing against their skin. One of the friends, Mike, had a particularly close encounter with a female ghost. He was walking down a dark hallway when he felt a chill run down his spine. Suddenly, he saw a figure standing at the end of the hallway, its face shrouded in shadow. Mike tried to run, but his legs felt heavy as if they were weighed down by some unseen force. He stumbled and fell, and as he looked up, he saw the figure looming over him, its eyes glowing red in the darkness. Mike tried to scream, but no sound came out. He felt as if he was suffocating, as if the very air around him was thick and heavy. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the female ghost vanished, leaving Mike gasping for breath on the floor. The friends gathered around him, their faces pale with fear. They knew then that they had to leave the haunted house, and fast. But as they turned to go, they realized that they were lost. The halls seemed to twist and turn in on themselves, leading them in circles. Panic began to set in as they frantically searched for a way out. They heard strange whispers and footsteps behind them, and they knew that they were being followed. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they stumbled upon a stairway leading down. They raced down it, their footsteps echoing loudly in the empty house. As they burst through the front door and stumbled out into the cool night air, they realized that they were all trembling with fear. The haunted house had left its mark on them, and they knew that they would never forget the strange and terrifying things they had experienced within its walls. As the friends made their way back to their car, they couldn't help but feel relieved that they had escaped the haunted house. But Mike couldn't shake off the feeling of intrigue that had been growing inside him since he had encountered the ghostly figure. He couldn't stop thinking about the strange, otherworldly beauty of the ghost, with her long, flowing hair and pale, translucent skin. And the more he thought about her, the more he felt a sense of thrill and excitement building inside him. Over the next few days, Mike found himself becoming increasingly obsessed with the ghost. He spent hours poring over books on the occult and scouring the internet for information on ghosts and hauntings. He even started going to psychic readings and seances in an attempt to connect with the spirit world. And then one night, as he lay in bed, he heard a faint whisper in his ear. He sat up, his heart racing, and saw the ghostly figure standing at the foot of his bed. Jack felt a sense of electricity coursing through his veins as he gazed at her, her body shimmering in the moonlight. And then, without thinking, he reached out and touched her. At first, it was like nothing he had ever experienced before. He felt a sense of warmth and connection that seemed to transcend time and space. But as the night wore on, a growing sense of unease began to gnaw at him. He couldn't shake off the feeling that there was something not quite right about the ghost. Her beauty seemed to be tinged with a sense of sadness and longing, as if she were trapped between worlds. And as he finally drifted off to sleep, his arms wrapped around the ghostly figure, he couldn't help but wonder what he had gotten himself into. As the first light of dawn filtered through the broken windows of the abandoned house, Mike slowly opened his eyes, his head pounding and his body aching all over. For a moment, he couldn't remember where he was or what had happened the night before. And then, as his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he saw the skeleton lying next to him on the broken bed.
No!
A scream caught in his throat as he realized that the beautiful ghost he had slept with was not what she seemed. He stumbled to his feet, his heart racing, and stumbled out of the room. He found his friends waiting for him in the hallway of the haunted house, their faces filled with concern and fear. "What happened?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Mike replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what happened. You went missing just now when we are trying to find a way out," John exclaimed. Mike was puzzled. Why are they still in the haunted house? He thought they have already escaped. Did he sleep with the female ghost, or is it a peak of his imagination? He couldn't shake off the feeling of fear and regret that was gnawing at him. He had been so obsessed with the idea of connecting with the spirit world that he had ignored all the warning signs. And now he was paying the price. As the friends finally made their way towards the front door, they realized that it was firmly locked, and they were unable to open it. Panic began to set in as they frantically searched for another way out, but all the windows were either boarded up or too high to reach. They were still trapped, and there was no way out. As they huddled together in the hallway, their minds racing with fear and desperation, They realized that they would have to work together if they were going to escape. They split up, searching every room and corridor for any signs of a way out. As they moved deeper into the house, they began to experience strange and unsettling things. The air grew colder, and they could feel a heavy sense of dread pressing down on them. They heard strange noises and whispers, and shadows seemed to move in the corners of their eyes. But they pressed on, driven by the need to escape. Finally, they came to a locked door, and John managed to break it down with a heavy piece of furniture. Beyond the door, they found a narrow staircase that led down into the darkness below. Without hesitation, they descended the stairs, their hearts pounding in their chests, and their breath coming in short, sharp gasps. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, they found themselves in a dark, damp cellar, filled with cobwebs and rusted tools. But they could see a glimmer of light in the distance, and they knew that they were getting closer to the outside world. They followed the light, crawling through narrow tunnels and ducking under low hanging beams, until they finally emerged into the open air, gasping for breath and trembling with exhaustion. They had made it out of the haunted house, but Mike couldn't help but feel a sense of relief that they had made it out alive. He knew that he would never be able to forget the terrifying experience that he had been through. He had learned a hard lesson about the dangers of dabbling in the supernatural, and he knew that he would never be the same again. The memory of that fateful night would haunt him for the rest of his life, a reminder of the thin line that separates the living from the dead, and the dangers that lurk in the darkness beyond.